Welcome back. What we're going to do in this recording is we're going to focus on the second point here of where we're going to change the data type of our raw data. Now, in particular, what we're looking at doing is where we have the three string measurements and we want to change them to actually numeric. So in SPSS, the first recording that was done, we looked at importing our data into SPSS or data from Excel. And what we found there was that three of our measurements ended up being imported as strings. And those string measurements, which were our first, second, and third questions, those string measurements would cause an issue for some particular descriptive statistics at a later stage that you might plan on doing, or some statistical inference that you might plan on doing at a later stage. So it's best to actually code these. Okay, now there's a few ways of always doing these things in multiple statistical packages. The one that I find quite useful here, definitely as we're trying to kind of get our head around potentially using SPSS and using the syntax, is the auto recode. Now, what's nice when it comes to the syntax in SPSS is like your syntax is essentially your script, it's your code. For a majority of the time, you don't actually have to be writing a lot of the code. You can navigate your way through the various options in SPSS, but then at the very end, instead of pressing OK, what you will do is you'll press paste, and then the syntax is generated as a result from that. Okay, so as an illustration, what we're going to just look at are these first three measurements that are here as set up as string measurements within SPSS, and we want to change them then to numeric. So we're going to go up to transform. Drop-down menu appears. We'll go to automatic recode. When it comes to automatic recode, I have the three measurements. Now, you could do one at a time, but obviously for the purposes of this recording, it's just as easy to look at our three string measurements all in one go. So I'm going to put across the three string measurements, put them across into the window over here on the right-hand side. Now, if you feel I'm going too fast, this is what's nice with the recording. You can just pause this and go back and replay certain parts if you want. Okay, so what we're looking at really doing here now is we're actually creating a new measurement. We're creating a new variable. So when it comes to the first one, so the original question, the title to it was, what is your gender? We are going to create a new name for that. Now, the new name I would generally use is something that is abbreviated. And the reason for that is you're going to see that we're going to be generating the syntax. And it's just nicer that the names for our measurements are shorter when it comes to the syntax. It's just easier to, I suppose, to follow when it comes, if need be. So what I'm going to use here for the first question is I'm going to call it Q1, because it's just linking in, oh, that's the first question. Now, sometimes people like to use an abbreviation M1 for measurement 1 or V1 for variable 1. It doesn't really matter too much. It's basically whatever makes sense to you. Okay, so I'm just going to use Q1, add new name. For the next one, I'm going to say Q2. And then for the next one, I'm going to say Q3. So what's going to be produced here are three new variables. Add new name there. Okay, and I did click that. Okay, then what SPSS will do for us now at the moment is when it comes to the gender one, if we look over here, we can see it's going to code female as 1, it's going to code male as 2, it's going to code rather not say as 3, and I'm going to select this option down here where we're going to be looking after kind of coding the missing values as well. So if I select that, it's then going to code the missing value as 4. Okay. Now, at the moment, the way this is set up then is when it moves on to the next next question type, it's going to code the first category as 1, the second category is 2, the third category is 3, and so on like that. If we don't want to use the same code again, then what we could select here is use the same recording scheme, which would mean that our next measurement coded here, which would actually be excellent, will be coded as 5, and then the one after that will be coded as 6. Now, I personally like that when I move on to a new measurement that the coding starts off at fresh, so it starts off at a 0 or 1. So I'm actually just going to leave that blank. I'm not going to select that, okay? Now, traditionally, you'd say, let's just press OK. But what we want to do is we want to have the syntax, because ultimately what we're doing here is we're creating three new measurements. We want the track record, we want the diary for that, so we're going to press paste. When you press paste, nothing seems to actually happen. Basically, your syntax now file has actually been updated in the background. So if we just go click on that, here's our syntax. We can now see that we have some new syntax. Now, again, the same as when we imported the data, the syntax hasn't run, okay? So nothing has actually changed with our data set yet, okay? So we need to actually run the syntax first, okay? So what we've done is we've pressed paste, which is and what the paste does is it generates the syntax. It doesn't run the syntax for you, okay? So you need to run it then. So what we'll do, I suppose, just to be consistent here with what we looked at in the first recording, is we'll just throw in a comment. So we'll start off with the asterisk, and we'll say change format of raw data, something that makes sense to you. Okay, raw data, and what we'll say is Q1 to Q3, and then full stop to end the comment. Okay, and so you can see here what it's saying then. I mean, it's not that you need to necessarily be looking at all, understanding all this, but I mean, ultimately we're saying we're auto-recoding the variables. It's saying what our variables are. It's saying what the 3 new names are, and basically here it's saying that we're missing it. Then I suppose it's saying that we're recording the missing. Okay, so we're just going to highlight that. Going to press Control or you could run the selection up at the top, that green triangle. We'll press Control R. When we press Control R, obviously the output file gets updated a small bit there. Not overly concerned with that. What we're mainly interested in is the SPSS file here, or the dataset. And what we can see here is now we actually have 3 new measurements. Okay, so we have 3 new measurements here, and they're labeled Q1, Q2, and Q3, which is kind of what we wanted. If we look at this as just a kind of a tracking here, we can say, look, that the male over here, the first subject, was coded as 2. That's quite good. The missing is coded as 4 because that was the next available number. Female was coded as 1, and rather not say was coded as 3. Okay, so that's quite good. Now what SPSS has done here with the coding is it's coded it based in alphabetical order. So if you look at it, female goes before male, which goes before rather not say, and then you have the missing value. So by default it goes by alphabetical order, which in this case actually works out quite nice. But then if we think of the second measurement, which was how do people rate their Wi-Fi, okay? So just I'll throw up the questionnaire just so you can kind of see this. So this is the ordinal measurement. So what we would like is SPSS to code excellent as 1, very good as 2, good as 3, fair as 4, and poor as 5. That's what we'd like to do, okay? But what SPSS is actually going to do is it's going to look at these categories and going to put them in alphabetical order. Okay, so this is always going to be the case when you auto recode. Okay, so at times, I suppose you'll do things in SPSS and you'll find that SPSS isn't doing it the most efficient way, the way that you want it to do it. But at the same time, like, how is it actually supposed to know what way you want to do it? Okay, so what SPSS does is it takes the levels to your category and it puts them in alphabetical order. So if we go to the variable view here, and if we just look at question 2 and look at the values, we can see here is what it's done is it's coded as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is perfect. It says fair is 2, good, poor, and very good. So the order it's actually not in its order, it's not in the ranking system that we'd like. So this is something that we're actually going to we have to address. Okay, so I'm just going to come out of that. The age one is actually the same. Okay, so what age group do you fall into? So 1 was less than 20. You'd imagine you'd like 2 to be 20 to 30, and then 3 to be greater than 30. But again, what SPSS has done is it's done it based kind of in alphabetical or kind of a symbol order here, which isn't actually the order that we want it to be in. Okay, this will generally always happen when it comes to the auto recode. If your levels are not in alphabetical order, it's going to default put them in alphabetical order, and then you'll have to rejig it yourself. Okay, so we're going to have to do this bit of manipulation. Okay, we're going to have to change around our, I suppose, the labels to the values. We're going to have to change around the values as well, okay? If you just look at what else, so that's just something we're going to have to address, which can sometimes, maybe turn people off it. But you're going to see, we do it once or twice, it'll seem quite new. But then after a while, you say, oh, this is all the same step. So I'm just going to go back to my syntax that I've generated before that's worked for this process, and I'm going to reiterate that syntax. And I'll try to illustrate that in this recording as well. What's just worth noting here, if we look at the gender question here, so we did 1, 2, 3 as female, male, and rather not say, you can see here then it's coded 4 is missing, and it's telling SPSS 4 is missing. Now, if you're not 100% sure what that actually means with regard to the missing values, so again, that will probably be something for a future recording if the interest is there. Okay, so what we're going to just look at doing without kind of focusing on too much more at the moment is we're just going to look at reordering these categories, because they're not in an ideal format. Because if we generate tables, the output to the tables will be in this order, or more so if we generate a bar chart, the bar charts will be in this order, and that doesn't really tell a good story when you think of the kind of the research story that you're trying to tell, or the narrative that you might be trying to apply to your research. Okay, so we're going to want to swap around the order. Now, what I would always feel is when I want to swap around the order, I want to make sure that I'm swapping it around correctly and that I'm not misplacing respondents, that the numbers still match up pre and post the swap, we'll say. So often what I try to do is I try to get a picture of what way the data is first, and then I do my manipulation, and then I take a picture at the end, and hopefully they marry up. Okay, so just again, there's numerous ways we can do this, but ultimately what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to run off a frequency table. So I'm going to go up to Analyze, going to go to Descriptive Statistics, and I'm going to go to Frequency. Which one am I looking at? I'm looking at the question 2. I'm going to put this across. Now, again, I think it would be worth kind of keeping a record of this step, because this is looking at your data before you swap around the categories. So what we're going to do is we're just going to paste this, go to our syntax. In the syntax, you can see that we have a bit of new syntax there. We'll throw in a comment just so we can kind of make sense of it. So the comment we'll say here is original, O-R-I-G-I, original order to question 2 responses. We'll say something like that. Something that makes sense to you, okay? I mean, you can type in anything you want, I suppose. I'm just trying to highlight, look, put in a couple of comments at the start. I'm just going to run this. So I'm going to highlight it, press Control R. When I run it, you get this output window. So what we can see here from this output here, that it is basically putting in our, I suppose, counting how many subjects fall into each category. And what we can see is the categories are in alphabetical order as opposed to the ranking system that we want them to be. Okay, so what we need to do here now is we need to kind of swap around our codes. If we look at this, SPSS is coding excellent as 1, fair as 2, very good as 3, poor as 4, and very, sorry, I said that wrong. It's coding excellent as 1, fair as 2, good as 3, poor as 4, and very good as 5. Now, what we really want is the 5 to be actually pushed up here. We want the 5 to become a 2. We want actually the 2 to become a 4. And we want the 4 to actually become a 5. That's actually what we're looking for. If we put this into order, that will be the system that we're going to look at, okay? Now, there are add-on packages, kind of these bundles that you can that you can include in SPSS, which would go into, they fall under this kind of heading of extensions, and you can get them through the utilities. Now, I have these add-on packages here that I would traditionally use at this point, but I felt for the purpose of this recording that some people might necessarily be familiar with these add-on packages. So I'm actually just going to do it kind of, I suppose, the purest way that we actually would generally do it, I suppose, as an introductory phase of, I suppose, recoding the values of our data, okay? So what I'm going to do, so I know that these exist. These are add-on packages that I would have installed. I'm going to actually just ignore them for the purpose of this recording, and I'm going to use it the kind of the purest way, which is I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to recode into the same variable. So this is where I'm going to ask SPSS to swap around the values, okay? Recode into the same variable. We're just going to focus on question 2 here, put that across all the new values. So this is where we keep a track of it. So we're going to say question 1, sorry, value 1, we're going to keep it as 1. So excellent was still excellent, so we're happy with that. Very good, it should be next. So very good is 5. That's what SPSS has coded it. We want it to become 2. Fair enough. Then the next one is good. Good was coded as 3. We're happy enough for that to stay as 3. Then fair is next. Fair originally is coded as 2. We want to change that to a 4. And then poor is last. Poor was coded as a 4. We want to change that to a 5. Okay. So maybe now this might seem a bit confusing at the moment, but if you look back at it, I know I'm going quickly through it, but if you look back at it, like this is kind of the process that we are interested in, and this should all marry up. Okay. The last thing I would look at doing here is I just tell SPSS to anything that was missing before, I wanted to keep it as missing here. So I'm going to press add as well to that. Okay. Press continue. Press paste because we want a track record of this. So we're going to press paste, go to our syntax, same old story. And now we can see we have a bit of a new update to our syntax. We'll throw in a comment here, which is where we are relabeling our, I suppose, relabel the values. Actually, so we're not actually relabeling here yet. We're actually just going to be reordering. Reordering, reorder question 2. Look, there's loads of ways you can actually write it. Okay, so we're just reordering question 2 here. Okay. I'll run that. So I'll highlight it, press Control R. The output window tells me here, look, it has been recoded. Okay, that's fine. I don't really know has it recoded it right yet. Sorry, I went to the wrong thing there. When I come here to the values, what we can see here with the values is apparently now the numbers have been swapped around. Apparently that's what happened. Okay, that's what the code is at the output has just told us. But what we can see here is that the values to the labels have not been updated. Okay, and this again would just seem can be frustrating at times. Like how come SPSS doesn't know since we've reordered the numbers that the values to those numbers actually, sorry, the labels to those values haven't actually updated either. How come it can't keep track of that? And it just can't. Okay, it can't. But this is why then you can maybe install one of these extensions and then apply that technique. Okay. But we're basically it hasn't, okay? So we want to basically change around these. So if we look at fair here, fair is coded as 2. What we ideally want to do is here, we want to type in very good, something like that, okay? Now, if we do this here and press to change, like there's nothing wrong with doing it, bar we don't have the code, the track record for doing it, okay? Because what we can see here is there's no paste button here, Okay, so if there's no paste button, that means if we change this data here, there's no track record for it. Okay, so we're not going to do that because that defeats the purpose of doing this recording. So what we need to do is we want to swap around these numbers, or we want to more kind of update the values to the labels, or sorry, the labels to the values, but we want a track record of doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to press cancel here. I'm going to go into the syntax, right? Now, given that there is no paste button, that ultimately means we actually need to write the syntax ourselves, okay? So what we're going to do here, now this could seem very hard, but it's not, because it's always going to be the same thing. We're going to just put in a comment that we're going to relabel values. I'm going to press stop there. Okay, so we're going to relabel the values. Now, when you start typing in kind of a bit of code, SPSS is kind of, I suppose, prompting you to how you might want to finish it. So what we're looking at doing here is we're looking at focusing on the values to the labels, okay? So what we could type in is value. If I start typing in value, you can see here, look, value labels. Now, it's not that this is overly obvious. I mean, back when I would have, I suppose, got my head around this at the very start years ago, this would have been kind of doing a Google search or something like that to find what was the SPSS syntax to changing the labels to values. Okay, so like that, always these search engines can be a great help. Okay, so if we look at these value labels, what question are we trying to focus on? Well, we're focusing on question 2, or what measurement. Okay, now we labeled the measurement Q2, so that's why I'm typing in Q2. It's whatever name that you attach, and that's why I said up here when we were recoding the variables, that's why I said to use shorter names, because you can see then in your syntax you're going to be using those shorter names going forward. Okay. So what you'd say then is you put in what code you're using. So the code, we have 1 first. What does 1 represent? Well, 1 represents excellence. So you give it you don't have to do the space by find. The space is just good for formatting. Apostrophe, excellent, EXCELLENT. Closing the apostrophe. 2 space is very good. 3 space is good. 4 space is fair. Close the apostrophe, and then 5 space apostrophe is poor. Okay, so there we go. All right, so you can say, look, that takes a bit of time, and all these things do take time, but you're going to see at the very end why this is really worth the effort. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight that because that's our new line of code. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to press Control-R. When I press Control-R, it gives me a bit of output in the output file, or a bit of script syntax in the output file to say, look, it has relabeled it. Let's go back to the data file. Has it actually done it? When we go back into the values here, we can now see, look, that's actually brilliant. That is the order we want. Okay, that's brilliant. That is really good. Okay, but the only thing is, has it actually done it correctly? Now, it says it's changed around these values. It says it has changed the labels that apply to the values, but has it actually done it the way we wanted to do it? Like if we look back here at our frequencies, when we generate a new updated table, we want to see excellence. 27 people said excellent. We want very good to be second next in line here, and we want to see the number 16 next to that. And then good should be 19, and then so on. So we want to rerun the frequencies here just to kind of, I suppose, show that, look, everything actually has worked out correctly. So let's go back into Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies, press Paste, because we want to run off the frequency again. Press Paste, go back to the syntax. Here's our frequency again. Now I'm just going to put in a comment again, just to kind of, I suppose, to highlight, just to get into habit that do check that, or do check, say check that reordering is correct. Okay, something like that. So basically, want to run off the frequencies again. Press Control-R. When we press Control-R here, what we can see then is if we do a quick up and down check here, so excellent is 27, very good, we can see there is 16 up here, very good is 16, brilliant, good is 19, fair is 18, poor is 12. Good is 19, fair is 18, and poor is 12. So it actually has reordered. So it's reordered it, and it is kind of it hasn't kind of mixed up any of the respondents and misclassified them, which is obviously what we don't want, okay? So we reordered the data, but it has done it correctly, all right? So that's quite good. I noticed, again, it does take time, but look, this is kind of will be worth it at the very end. Now we want to apply the same steps to our question tree. Our question tree now has less categories. Okay, there's only 3 categories here, but they're not in the same order. Okay, it's not in the order that we want. So we want to rejig this as well. Now, we don't want to repeat the same process, because ultimately we've done the whole process here of where we went up to transform, we went to recode into the same variable, and then changed the values, and then had to change the labels to the values, and then did the frequencies pre and post. We have all the syntax to that. So actually what we just basically want to do is we actually want to rerun the syntax. But instead of question 2, we wanted to say question 3. Now this is where the syntax is very good now for us, okay? We have the structure. We're happy that the structure is working. So I'm going to copy that structure, and I'm going to paste it down. Okay, so I've repasted it, or not repasted it, but I've just actually pasted it. And now here I'm going to change anywhere it says question 2 to question 3. Okay, so you just have to take your time then when you're doing this. So question 3, I'm going to want it to rerun the frequencies for question 3. That's fine. Then I want to reorder question 3 by recoding it. 1 stays as 1. I want 2 to become 3. And I want 3 to become 2. And I don't need the 4 and 5 grouping, okay, because they were the original and we don't have them. That's fine. With the value labels, we want to change the value labels for question 3. The code 1 is less than 20 years. Then space, if I'm just keeping it to the way it was in the questionnaire, less than 20 years. Code 2 should be 20 to 30. 20 space 30 years, like that. And code 3 should be greater than 30 years. Okay, so perfect. We don't need the code 4 and 5 because we didn't have any categories for 4 and 5, so just get rid of that. And then the sanity check, did everything work out okay? We'll do a question 3, run off the frequency at the end. Okay, so at a quick glance, what are we doing there? We'll be running off the frequency at the start. We're doing the recoding. We're updating the labels, I suppose, the labels to the values, and then we're running the frequencies again. So we don't have to run them all off individually. What we're going to do is we're going to highlight all our new syntax. That's all our new syntax. We're going to press Control-R. Let's check our frequency table. So this is kind of like your hold your breath situation. Are we happy with how it's done it? Well, what we can see here is we have the less than 20 at 25 people. There's 30 people that were greater than 30 and 37 between 20 to 30. So when it reorders this, what we should obviously see is these reordered, and we should see the numbers 25, 37, 30, 25, 37, 30. Boom. Okay, and then if we come back over here, just to make sure that we're really happy with it, if we look at this category here, we can see now it is reordered. Okay, and you can see there that that was actually done much faster than it was. So for the question 3, rejigging it was done a lot faster than question 2, and the reason that is because of the syntax. Okay, so with the syntax, we had a method that actually works. Okay, we showed that it works for question 2, so we're just reapplying it then for question 3. Okay, so again, it seems to take a bit of time at the start, but you can see this is just the same thing that you do over and over again. Okay, and ultimately, why do we do this? Because if somebody questions us, how do we actually manipulate the data, and did we maybe do something wrong? Well, here is our diary for everything that we've done, and it highlights that we've done nothing wrong. So what we did yesterday, or in the previous recording, is we just would have saved this syntax. So I'm just going to save it here. And I'm actually going to stop this recording now because it's just gone on a bit long. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back then for part 3. And part 3 then we're going to focus on a couple of more points. Now it won't take us as long to go through the other points. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting now with doing point 1 and point 2. Okay, so remember to subscribe, and if you subscribe to the channel, you'll see that all these files that we're looking at here for this recording, they're available for you to download then for yourselves, and then you'll have actually the syntax as well. Okay, so come back for part 3 to this recording.